Welcome, everyone. My name is Keira Vanderbeck, and I'm a member of the international team at Destination Canada. Thank you for joining our webinar today on the Yukon, an area of rich living history, stunningly unique geography, and more epic scenes than a Hollywood blockbuster. This destination truly lives up to the true North, strong and free. With a footprint the size of Spain, but land that is 80% wilderness, this is the destination to escape from it all, a region with jaw-dropping scenery, world-class adventures, and an incredible cultural history. To tell you a little bit more about this unique and exciting destination, I would like to introduce you to Stephen Reynolds, Marketing Specialist, America's Developing Markets and RTOs with Tourism Yukon. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Keira. It's a pleasure to be with you. Hello, everybody. It is my pleasure and honor today to share a little bit about my home territory, the Yukon. So let's just start right in here with our glowing hearts. People often ask, what's domestic and yet exotic? And the simple answer is, welcome to the Yukon. Most people have an understanding of what the Yukon might be, but I'm just going to try to tell you a few things as we get going. Where it is, what it is, how you get here, talk about a little bit of our seasons, accommodations, and give you a bit of summary of some of our major communities. Where is the Yukon anyway? Everybody knows, but nobody knows. Especially Canadians seem to think that it's somewhere right beside Alaska, right? Well, it is. So here's the Yukon in Canada. As you can see, it is right beside Alaska. We're one of the few groups of Canadians who think of our American neighbors to our left instead of underneath us. And that line at the bottom of the Yukon divides the three territories of Canada, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut from the provinces. That's the 60th parallel. So when we come up to the Yukon, we get north of 60. How do I get here? Most people will fly. Even Canadians will probably fly up here. And you can see most of our connectivity is through British Columbia and Alberta. That's with one of our local airlines, Air North. Their flights do reach out as far as Ottawa in season. And you can see the top line leading over to Frankfurt for any European guests coming direct, Frankfurt, Whitehorse. The northern routes lead up through Dawson City that we'll talk about a little while, as well as Old Crow, Yukon's only fly-in community, and up to Inuvik in the Northwest Territories. So what is the Yukon? It takes a lot of words to describe it, and here are just a few of them. That might be an eyeful, and you may not be able to read them all. So let me try to make it a little more simple. What's the Yukon in pictures? Well, it's about everything you've ever imagined, plus a lot more, and things you've never imagined. So am I going too fast for you? Let me slow down a little, give you a little Yukon moment. I'll try to talk a little bit more on Yukon time. So Yukon is the land of the midnight sun. Most people think of it as aurora borealis, things like that. But from April until August, we are glowing under the sun pretty much 24 hours a day. The sun may set, but the light doesn't go away. And at 2 in the morning, you can read a newspaper outside of your hotel or the bar, and you don't need any artificial light. People think it might be cold up here all year long, but that's not quite true either. We can get up into the 30s or 90s, depending on which Fahrenheit Celsius scale you like to use. Through our summer, we have incredible outdoor adventures. Obviously, the scenery is world class. There is great history here. The culture is very rich from both indigenous people, the gold rush, and the modern inhabitants of the land. Our outdoor adventures span the gamut. Whatever you like to do in Southern Canada, you will love to do in the Yukon. Hiking, backpacking, bicycling, horseback riding, anything. And you're surrounded by wilderness for most of the time. There are road trips of a lifetime, and people do spend a lifetime exploring or save for a lifetime to explore once. With over 5,000 kilometers of uncrowded highways, we have no traffic issues at all, unless you're stuck in construction. Fly drive vacations are one of our well-known features for people who don't want to drive all the way from wherever they live to here or cannot, and then driving around the Yukon, typically coupled with Alaska as well. There are amazing campsites and parks, and we're even seeing winter driving itineraries now all the way up the Dempster Highway into the Arctic Circle. We are a paddler's haven. The Yukon River is the third longest in North America, and its tributaries and other watersheds within the Yukon fill boaters' dreams for years and years before they actually take the adventure to come up to the north. We are home of 4 of Canadian heritage rivers, but many, many more rivers, some that very few people travel on, others that are well popular, like the Yukon River itself. People can be self-guided, they can hire guides, They can go for day trips or just a few hours, or multi-day expeditions far into the backcountry where they fly in, spend 2 or 3 weeks in remote areas, and then come on back out to civilization. The Yukon from above is something absolutely spectacular. There is no other better way to see how much space and how much land and how much majesty nature holds than to get into a plane and look down upon the northwest corner of Canada. There are ski planes year-round. We don't need winter to get up on skis. This photo that you see now is actually of a company that lands within view of Mount Logan. That is Canada's tallest mountain in the background of this photo. Float planes will take you anywhere you want to go, from fly-in trips for fishing, hiking, or just lodge hopping day to day. You can even take a sightseeing flight from Whitehorse and stop at a lodge for lunch and return to your hotel in downtown Whitehorse that evening. Aurora viewing is a popular activity for many of our guests, and we often hear that they don't want to be cold, that they think that aurora viewing must happen midwinter to get the best view of the northern lights. And while that is common, that is not the only way to do it. Once the sky is dark, which usually happens around the 3rd week of August, the northern lights are back in view. They're on all summer, but our midnight sun flushes them out, so you can't really appreciate them. But by the end of August and in through September, we're back to viewing the dance of the night sky. And that will continue right through the fall and the winter, right up until the middle part of April. Myself, I've seen them as late as the 15th of May and as early as the 7th of August. But obviously the tour season is a little narrower than that to try to increase the likelihood of guests having an excellent aurora experience. We recommend 3 nights as a minimum stay for optimum viewing success. And at that stay rate, we're looking at about a 90 to 95% success rate of guests seeing some northern lights. There are group tours, FIT travels. Most of the current tours are based in the Whitehorse and what we call the Carcross or Southern Lakes area of the Yukon. But we're seeing expansion now into Dawson City, Haines Junction, and even up to Old Crow. When people stay out at lodges, they can view all night. When they're staying in the downtown areas and they're doing a commute, they would be picked up by their Aurora tour operator and dropped off back at their hotel sometime in the small hours of the morning. Once we get into the Yukon winter proper, most people's impressions of the Yukons are fitting with what we have. A lot of people imagine it to be nothing but snow and mountains, and we have plenty of both. Our temperatures can be cold. They can be extremely cold. We can reach down to minus 40, even minus 50 up in the northern parts during the middle of winter. But our average temperatures range between minus 15 and minus 30 through the bulk of the winter. Winter clothing is available, and we recommend that people rent. I have friends from southern Canada who think that their clothing is good enough. They've been proven wrong on several occasions, so I always recommend that people rent good gear once they're here. It's a dry cold, we love to tell people, and that's because the Yukon has a semi-arid climate and our humidity is low. We tend to have great snow from December to April, and obviously with the changes that we're seeing in modern climate, that can be an early or a late start to winter and sometimes an early or late ending. But on average, from mid-December to early April is good snow conditions for dog sledding, snow machining, walking safely out on rivers and lakes. In January and February, it's the clearest and coldest. The cold is a good brag factor, and the clearest gives you excellent night sky views and brilliant sunshine and blue skies during the day for your daytime activities. And people always wonder, isn't it dark? Well, in the December solstice, we have about 6 hours of the sun above the horizon. That's actual daylight. But don't forget, because of our northern latitude, we have extended twilight periods of almost 45 to 60 minutes on either side of that, giving us about 8 hours of light, which for most Canadians is about all you're going to get in southern Canada too. By March, we're up to 12 hours of sun above horizon with, again, another hour on either side of that. So we're well ahead of our southern neighbors by the time we get through to the end of our winter. We have festivals and events and beautiful vistas that are always there. It's an incredible place to come. It's an incredible place to be and just relax. And there's always the quirky parts of the Yukon, like the frozen hair contest. If you go to our local hot pools and you freeze your hair, usually minus 30 is about the temperature where you get the good hairdos going. And then you lift your hair out. Of course, it freezes in place and your photo might win you the contest. snowmobiling, snowshoeing, ice fishing, and just being outdoors in an environment and a climate that's quite unfamiliar, even to Canadians, can be an exhilarating experience. The Yukon is filled with a wide variety of accommodations. We have 3- and 4-star hotels in towns, mostly in the main centers of Whitehorse and Dawson City. Little reaches out into the communities for motels and hotels. We have B&Bs from rustic to gourmet, and there is a plenitude of wilderness lodges, resorts, cabins, hostels, all kinds of things you can imagine. Most accommodations will provide transfers from the airport. Some will do self-catering options. Some will even package everything up for you. And sometimes it's great, even if you're renting an RV and driving around, to just put your feet up and relax in the comfort and hospitality of somebody else's place for a day or two at the beginning or end of your trip. If you're driving around the Yukon or you want to drive up from southern Canada, you can see there are 2 routes coming out of BC. Highway 37 is the Stewart-Cassiar Highway leading up out of the Vancouver area, and Highway 97 is the Alaska Highway while it's in BC coming up through Fort Nelson. Once you get onto the Alaska Highway, your entry is through Watson Lake in the Yukon, and you can see that there's actually parts of Alaska, Haines and Skagway that are accessible by vehicle only from the Yukon, and Atlin, British Columbia, the northernmost community in that province that is again only accessible by road through the Yukon. Whitehorse, you can see, is in the center of the image here, with Haines Junction a little bit off to the left, Dawson City way up to the top near the Alaska border, and Watson Lake again down by the lower right of the Yukon territory. We'll visit those communities shortly. We look over to the left and we see Alaska there with the major centers of Anchorage and Fairbanks. That's all driving itineraries. And number 5 highway, the Dempster Highway, used to just run up to Inuvik in the Northwest Territories and has recently been extended all the way up to Tuktoyaktuk. So Canada truly is, by highway, a country that's connected from coast to coast to coast. Whitehorse, commonly known as the Wilderness City, is the Yukon's capital city. The population is just under 30,000, although that moves around, and it's named for a set of rapids that are just upriver from where this photograph is showing you. This is downtown Whitehorse with the Yukon River running right through it. And just behind us, if we were to turn around and look at another photograph, we would see the Whitehorse Rapids. It's an excellent area for outdoor adventures. The Kwanlin Dun First Nations Cultural Center is right downtown on the water. The SS Klondike National Historic Site is the boat that you see in the foreground, the largest sternwheeler ever to ply the Yukon River in the heyday of the great ships before the highways were built in the 40s and 50s. Although Whitehorse is our largest city, it still exudes a small town charm, provides daily access, and is the hub of the highways as we saw on the map previously. It's a perfect base to explore from, with everything to do within the city and beyond. If we go north to the Klondike, we reach Dawson City, just under 2,000 people living there year round. It is truly a unique and authentic experience. And as my friends in Dawson would say, you haven't been to the Yukon until you've been to Dawson City. It is the site of one of the most extensive Parks Canada historical complexes and the Danjejo Cultural Center for Indigenous cultural understanding and awareness. There's still active gold mining in the area, and guests can always try their hand at gold panning. It tends to light the fever once you've tried it once. We are the home of Canada's oldest legal casino and Diamond Tooth Gertie shows run nightly through the summer. Shops and dinings, and it's about a 6-hour drive from Whitehorse, but our local airline, Air North, will get you up there in just under an hour on their northern services there. There's so much to see in the Klondike. Don't just go overnight. You have to add a couple of days at least to your itinerary. Just north of Dawson City, about an hour and a half drive or a tour, is Tombstone Territorial Park. And this is one of the most spectacular sets of scenery around. People driving there, if your guests are ever going there, please be sure to tell them to drive 2 more kilometers past the interpretive center to get to the lookout. This photo is taken there, and it is literally less than 2 kilometers from the interpretive center. Incredible wildlife and scenery, excellent hiking, backpacking, and even heli hiking. And when we say fall colors, we can talk about August, early September. Don't wait for Thanksgiving for Canadians, because the only color you'll see up here is brown. Moving back down to Whitehorse and then further to our east towards Haines Junction and Kluane National Park and Reserve. We're about an hour and a half west of Whitehorse. And this is home of the Champagne-Ajac First Nation and their Daku Cultural Center, which is within the same complex as the Parks Canada office for Kluane National Park, as well as Tourism Yukon's Visitor Interpretive Center. This is part of the largest UNESCO World Heritage Site in the world. Mount Logan is Canada's tallest peak, and it's nestled deep within the park. You can't see it from the highway, but a flight seeing tour on a clear day will get you a view of that giant, massive mountain. The world's largest non-polar ice fields live here, and flying above Kluane National Park and Reserve is a truly humbling experience. There's an infinite number of outdoor activities to do in the area, and guests should plan on staying for at least 2 days, maybe 3, depending on what they want to do and how much hiking. There's an unlimited number of trails and vistas to get to. It's a spectacular part of the Yukon and Canada. Moving down towards the south from Whitehorse on our way to Skagway, Alaska, is Carcross. This was named for Caribou Crossing, a narrows between two lakes where the herds of caribou used to travel on their way to and from their summer grounds. Carcross was shortened because the local mail operator was tired of receiving mail for Caribou Crossing, British Columbia, so he contracted the name to Carcross, and it's stayed like that ever since. We're only 40 minutes away from Whitehorse, nestled into the beautiful lakes and mountains around there, and within the Carcross Tagish First Nation traditional territory. There's a brand new Carcross Learning Center there to expose yourself to Indigenous culture and learn a little bit more about the peoples who are here long before gold rushes and railways. Beautiful cafes and world-class mountain biking and hiking in the area. And the White Pass and Yukon route, the train tracks that you can see in front of you here, which was built in 1900, still comes up to Carcross today as it runs from Tidewater all the way up through the mountains to Carcross. There are multiple tour options from Whitehorse down through Skagway, up back on the train, or people doing a loop tour that will take them through the southeast corner of Alaska. Watson Lake is the gateway to the Yukon for people coming in along the Alaska Highway, and it is the first point of entry into the Yukon and our first community to welcome you. It's a small community, very well known, very appreciated for road travelers, and a good reason to travel south from Whitehorse if you're just flying into Whitehorse and moving around the Yukon itself. The signpost forest was started during the Second World War while they were building the Alaska Highway with one single sign from a homesick soldier, and now boasts over 85,000 personally hung and memorable pieces of identity from around the world. There's historic hangars, the Northern Lights Center, the marsh, and other trails. And in the spring and fall, we are treated in Marsh Lake to an incredible number of migratory birds moving to and from the Yukon and further places north. These are a few of our major communities, and certainly the ones that are ready to welcome you. I hope you've enjoyed your little tour of the Yukon. I'd like to pause and give you a small Yukon moment, because the whole point of getting this far away from your normal is to relax, unwind, and enjoy. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody might have any.
Thanks, Stephen. That was fantastic. The Yukon's been on my bucket list for a while now, and I have even more reason to want to go. Now, we do have a few questions for you. So you talked about the endless summer nights and chasing auroras in the winter. But what can travelers expect when they come to the Yukon in the spring or the fall?
That's a great question. We are seeing more and more people interested in what we used to call the off-for-shoulder seasons. Springtime in the Yukon is, really from early to mid-April right through until the end of May, depending on how the seasons evolve and shift that particular year. It's a time of year of very rich growth. So we've been under the ice cover and under the cold snap for a while. Everything is thawing and moving quickly. So the most significant things are the change in daylight, up to 5 minutes a day. So in a single week stay, visitors can experience almost an extra hour, about 45 minutes of daylight within their own little trip, which tends to blow their minds. And the migration of animals We are on one of the most prominent northern flyways, all the way from Watson Lake through Whitehorse and up through the Tintina Trench to Dawson City, for those birds that are going to nest up in the high Arctic. So we will see swans in early April, cranes in May. The sheep are lambing, and the bears are coming out of hibernation and a little more plentiful at roadside. We always ask that people view them respectfully and safely from within their vehicles, of course, and don't stop in strange places on the highway where nobody can see you. However, it's a time of a crossover between winter outdoor activities and summer outdoor activities. The trails can still have lots of snow on them higher up in the mountains, so the hiking can be less optimal at higher elevations, but mountain bikers and people who want to go on hikes around the lower areas are just, they're treated to a plethora of blooms. Obviously the plant life is very different here than in other places, but if you look closely, you can see the subtleties of nature warming up from their long winter's rest in the spring. Amazing. In the fall, we talked a little bit about the aurora viewing season stretching through the fall, it not being just a winter activity. So that is one of the primary motivators for fall. Fall colors in the Yukon can start as early as the third week of August up in the Dempster Highway and the Tombstone area, and they may last right through to the end of September down in the Southern Lakes, Carcross, Whitehorse area. So people coming at that time of year can actually move around and get extra doses of fall colors, and then if they live in Southern Canada, go home for Thanksgiving and see another dose of fall colors in another area. When I moved from Ontario, I was worried that I would miss the bright red of the maples, but don't worry. The kinnicknick and bearberry and small knee-high bushes in the mountains are a blood red color in the fall. So we still have the golden golds of the poplars and things like that, plus the red of the high alpine sedges. As we move through into October and Thanksgiving, we'll lose most of the foliage. The nights become cooler, so bonfires and enjoying yourself in the evenings is more chilly. Yukoners don't like to say cold yet, because we know that November will get a little cooler and December will throw us into real winter. But October, November, we can experience more overcast skies as the seasons are changing. So looking towards the cultural experiences of museums and Indigenous cultural centers. We have a number of people coming up for retreats, whether those are of a spiritual yoga style or people trying to gather information about local knowledge and things like that. So there are a wide variety of things to do, but most people tend to focus on indoor activities once you pass Thanksgiving until you get back to what we would consider real winter sometime close to Christmas.
When us Southerners it's a little too much for us.
Yeah, exactly. No, the Aurora tour companies are running steady through October, November. Okay. And we quite often have people reporting amazing sightings at that time of year. Yeah. And of course, there's fewer tourists. Yeah,
it's nice. There's always benefits. Yeah. So now we're recording this at the start of summer as everyone's starting to plan for their annual holidays. What is on your personal itinerary for a trip to the Yukon?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm lucky to have lived here for over 20 years and certainly blessed to have the job with Tourism Yukon that allows me to see and show off some of the most beautiful places. My first recommendation for anybody coming to the Yukon is to give yourself more time than you think. You think it's a small place, you think there's not much to do, you're wrong on both counts. Give yourself at least 5 days. If you can, give yourself 10. 2 weeks would be ideal, and really look around. The Yukon is a magnificent place, and what makes it truly magnificent are the people that you meet along the way. And rushing through the Yukon doesn't allow you to meet the locals who are incredibly friendly, want to welcome you, and want to show off their little secret hidden spots of the Yukon. So take your time. That would be the first thing I would tell people. And then really decide what you love to do or what you'd love to experience for the first time in your life. Obviously, if you're into opera and giant shopping malls, you should pick another location because we have neither of those. However, if there's anything outdoors that pleases you, we have all of that plus more. So, if you enjoy boating wherever you live or you enjoy being on the water, then plan to take a little river trip, even if it's a half hour from downtown Whitehorse down the Yukon River and get picked up by your guiding company or you're guided all day. Just experiencing the level of water that is here and how much, the rivers were the highways long before the highways were here. So that's one thing. Getting out and hiking, even if you're just going on a local hike to Miles Canyon around the Whitehorse area or out Fish Lake area, you don't have to go up into the crazy hikes of the high mountains. But if you like that, we've got lots of those too. And then always, always, always get up in the air. For me, flight seeing is a critical component of anybody's Yukon trip. I understand that it's an expensive component, but it's a worthy investment for anybody. Almost every one of my guests who have gone up flight seeing at some point during their stay have talked about that single experience the most during the rest of their trip and once they get home to tell their family and friends.
Definitely. Just seeing that different perspective, you don't realize how much more you see from the air.
Precisely. You don't realize how much is there until you're up in the sky.
Amazing. Sounds great. Well, that actually takes us to the end of our webinar. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing your insight and your expertise into this amazing destination. And I really can't wait to come and experience the Yukon for myself.
Well, I'd love to welcome you up here, Keira, and to everybody else, just let us know when you're coming, and we're happy to have you here.
Sounds great. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you taking the time to learn more about this destination. And so in the next time, take care.
Take care.